I'm Jim Anderton, and this is the Industry Insights and Trends podcast. On this show, we'll explore the length and breadth of 21st century engineering, from civil engineering mega projects to innovation at the quantum level. We speak with subject matter experts and industry watchers from every sector of the engineering discipline. You know, the march of automation in manufacturing has always been associated with the fear of job loss. The rapid advancement of industrial robotics in the last 20 years has created a cottage industry of speculation over the economic and societal shifts caused by a reduced need for workers on the assembly line. U.S. manufacturing workers live in a high-wage nation and are especially vulnerable. But do they fear the rise of the machines? The Pittsburgh Robotics Network has just released the results of a new national survey that examines U.S. worker attitudes toward our AI-driven automation revolution. And joining me to discuss the surprising results of that survey is Jennifer Apicella, Executive Director of the organization. Jen, welcome to Industry Insights and Trends.
Hey there. Thank you so much for having me. Happy to be here.
Jen, before you discuss the really interesting results of that survey, could you tell us a little bit, please, about the Pittsburgh Robotics Network?
Absolutely. So the Pittsburgh Robotics Network is a unique organization because Pittsburgh happens to have over 125 robotics companies that operate in the greater Pittsburgh area and over 100 AI companies that operate as well. So we are an innovation hub, a deep tech global economy. And our organization is a nonprofit economic development that seeks to help these companies grow, commercialize, and connect with the global resources that are needed to do just that.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's almost counterintuitive because when I think Pittsburgh, I still think of steel. I still think of heavy industry as opposed to sort of high tech.
Certainly was the past and our history, but I can tell you our present and the future is absolutely driven by the engine that is innovation, and has been now for about 4 decades, so 40 years in the making. These assets, these rich research and development assets and engineering core assets have translated into entrepreneurial startups, mid to large size companies, jobs. And it's just really a fantastic renaissance to see the city thriving in this new era, this what we'll call a AI revolution.
Yeah. Now, Jen, you did a national survey of U.S. worker attitudes toward robotics, and the results were very surprising, almost counterintuitive. Can you tell me about the survey?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that we felt was important to do is to understand what the average person who maybe does not sit in a front row seat the way our team and we do here in Pittsburgh, where we get to see these sort of what's going on behind these closed door labs and what's happening in the world today. And we sort of wondered, if the average person doesn't get to see that, how would they interpret, right? What is going on in reality? What is happening both economically, in society, in business? Because we're right now in an era of rapid transformation when it comes to technology. Probably unprecedented. I shouldn't say probably, actually, yes, unprecedented in the world today. And so what we wanted to see was, do we believe that these trends are going to be reflective of the realities that we're seeing? Had a hunch that there were going to be some malalignments there, and the survey was able to sort of illuminate and highlight where some of those discrepancies lie.
Yeah. And we're conditioned almost by mass media to regard robotics as job killers. Enthusiasts, people from inside the industry have said it'll be the opposite. Actually, it will create an upskilling and better quality jobs, which will be better for everybody in the long run. How do the workers' attitudes pan out in terms of your survey? Do they see it that way?
Yeah, so it's very interesting. So if we separate, right, robotics from AI, we're seeing two very different things. Both are what we call transformative for jobs and the workforce. So I think it's an incorrect narrative. It certainly is much more clickbait worthy to say these types of things are taking jobs. But really what's happening is we're watching and living real time in a massive transformation of the workforce when it comes to using advanced technology. Now, AI is transformative in a way that is perhaps transitioning jobs at a little bit faster of a pace and changing white collar and knowledge worker jobs in a way that's never happened before. And then what we're seeing in robotics, right, is that we're seeing almost the exact opposite happen. We're seeing the transformation happen with an increase in job opportunity because AI is now enabling robotics to become commoditized, more readily available, and businesses can now adopt robotics into their operations in ways they never have been able to before because they weren't able to afford it.
Yeah.
So AI is bringing costs down for these technologies, which is increasing opportunity, but that's making upskilling, reskilling, and new jobs be created.
Yeah, yeah. Did your survey show that workers fear the notion of overall numbers, of overall job loss? We know that that robotics creates higher value, better paying jobs. Will it create them in enough volume or enough numbers to sort of compensate for the displacement effect?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what we're going to see and what we've started already seeing in this trend is that when it comes to robotics, decades ago, right, it was largely just an engineering led job market. And so the individuals who were founding these companies were inventors. They were engineering and spearheading the first iterations, the prototypes, and the first version products of these types of things. And then they were emerging into markets that could afford and wanted to adopt these things and that were helping to augment their workforce. So if you think about it this way, robots really are the power tools of modern business. They are not the robots of the past that largely, I think people had that sort of bitter taste in their mouth about, where we saw factory workers being laid off and replaced with just very large scale machines. Those machines were not intelligent. They weren't what we call collaborative robots with humans. They were meant to be in cages. They were meant to just replace human workers completely. That is not the case today. The robots of this modern era are meant to be collaborative and augment humans, just like being more productive tools to be used with humans in the workforce. And that is where the exciting opportunity is, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Now I've been around, I come from manufacturing myself. I've been around production automation, certainly not since the beginning. The first industrial use in America was a General Motors die casting plant in 1961 with a Unimate. But there was originally the sense that we're going to use robotics where the tasks or the jobs are dangerous, heavy, or so incredibly unappealing to human workers that it's just difficult to even recruit. And of course, you think of things like casting plants, foundry work, plastics, volume plastics or metal die casting manufacturing, things where the environment is hot, heavy, dangerous, uncomfortable. So these are natural things to automate. Then we moved to things where it became a matter of there's some precision work where the robots are simply more dexterous. So you're going to stuff components into a printed circuit board. Well, you can do that by machine far faster and with greater repeatability than human fingers can. So the sort of the fine work then began to be replaced. In the industries that I've covered over the decades, that what I've not seen is a wholesale displacement of numbers of assembly line workers. Everyone predicted it meant that you'd go from 200 people in your manufacturing plant down to 20. And if anything, I've seen numbers stable or increase with the addition of production automation. That's contrary to the attitudes of workers I've talked to on the shop floor, who either express some concern about the future of their jobs because of automation, or conversely argue that, well, we can't do anything about it anyway, so I'm not going to worry about it, but I think it's going to happen. So the impression I got anecdotally was that the impression that it's going to have impact has always been there, even when it doesn't actually create a serious jobs impact in there. Is that what you're finding? I'm quite surprised. I expected that with the mass media push telling us it's going to end the world, that people would be panicking about the advance of automation.
Well, I think what we're seeing here is that there's a fear-based narrative where people are sort of projecting their fears onto what they think will happen versus the reality of what's actually happening. So when a business adopts or adds applied robotics into their operations, what we're finding here is that yes, maybe it transforms some of operationally what humans did before, but there's so much for humans to do. Right? When was the last time you talked to someone at their job and they said, "Oh, I'm bored. There's nothing to do." If anything, the pace in which workers have to keep up with is overwhelming. People are burning out and being stressed out all the time. So having these more efficient tools be introduced into workplaces is helpful, and it's creating new types of jobs. So whereas the old wave of robots really were mostly PhDs, engineering, high skilled, types of positions with lots of credentials. As soon as you buy a robot, you need things like We now have to have a technician to maintain the robot and keep it running. We now have to have operators who can operate the robot. These were people who before were doing just those tasks you said. They were either doing dull, dirty, dangerous things, and their day-to-day jobs were unsafe, or they were tedious, right? And people were burning out from just having to do these repetitive and very fine motor skill, very very challenging things that just wear on the body. So these are the new jobs. These are the new types of credentials we're seeing. These are the new skills that we're seeing, and it's a whole new era of opportunity.
Yeah, yeah. Jen, talk to me a little bit about cobots, because one thing I've noticed with the rise of cobots is that cobots have been revolutionary in a couple of ways that I've seen in manufacturing. One is that when you take the safety guarding away, you create an environment in which workers can actually literally stand next to robotics on an assembly line, for example, their function with it. And do that without that fear that this machine will either A, hurt me, or B, that it will result in a factory that I can't work in even if I wanted to. I get a sense now that with cobots, you have a world in which you don't have to tear your factory apart and reconfigure the lines completely around the machines. You can essentially continue to assemble things the way you did with humans, but just plug the odd robot in here or there at specific workstations on the line. Do you think cobots are going to change workers' attitudes toward robotic on the shop floor?
Absolutely. I think just exactly what you said, just it changes, it allows for a more efficient workflow with these workstations, these work cells. It allows for humans to focus on things that are much more intellectually appealing and much less physically demanding. And I think it allows for more intellectual curiosity and stimulation, right? So now you might be, instead of having to do the full scale sort of factory line automation yourself with your hands or with a conveyor belt or in a very stressful situation where it's very physically demanding, you now get to operate a series of different workflows where you are helping to work alongside these robots, but they're not meant to replace you. And so I think that's just much more intellectually rewarding work. And the workers that we've talked to and that we're witnessing find their day-to-days to be a lot more productive, a lot less stressful, and less physically demanding.
Yeah. Well, we know that the robotics require a very human support chain of technicians, programmers, of support humans to make the systems work. Are there enough people to support this robotics revolution available now? Are there enough technicians?
So I think that is because it's a new emerging type of skill. That means it's a new emerging type of thing where people have to go get and obtain that skill and get credentialed for it. And so right now, I know that sourcing robotics technicians is a challenge to find people who have those skills, who have those credentials. So we're seeing an emergence of these programs that are being created and trying to really help people understand that this is valuable skills training that you should go through. Because when people have such a valuable asset like time, and let's be honest here, the most valuable resource for all of humanity, the one that we all have poverty in, is time. So if someone's going to invest their time in reskilling or upskilling what it is that they do for their career, what it is they do for their job and their livelihood, they just have to understand that this is a good use of their time. And that's why having the proper narratives out there, not sensationalized media clicks, fear-based narratives, but these pragmatic, reality-based information pieces that tell them this is the future, right? Not only in present day are these jobs out there, and you can look, if you just go online and look up robotics technician jobs, you'll see there's a plethora of them in a whole variety of places all over the United States. And our federal government is onshoring manufacturing.
Yeah. I noticed that an example comes to mind. I understand that there's a company that makes T-shirts. I think Walmart's a major customer, and they do that south of the Mason-Dixon line, mainly because automation means that they can price compete now with a Bangladeshi or Vietnamese clothing manufacturer, because when you take the labor cost out of the equation, suddenly the distance to market starts to matter again. And of course, and this movement we've noticed starting even before the current administration and the move to consciously reshore is when you take the the arbitrage play, when you take the labor cost advantage away from offshore manufacturers, could we look at a future world where we have factories, do you think, distributed across the United States, where you literally build a smaller plant, you build it close to a major market rather than a central distribution?
Absolutely. I think if the United States is going to be competitive with our onshore manufacturing, we're going to have to take into account these ways of operating, right, in order to stay globally competitive. And so it's a challenge to do that, right? Because just you said the labor market here in the U.S. is more higher cost, higher wage. And so to do that, they're going to have to implement automation in very strategic ways to augment that cost, or to reduce that cost, and just to be smart about where they're doing it. I always tell people the juice has got to be worth the squeeze in terms of where you implement these types of technologies, whether it be AI, whether it be physical AI, right, which is the new term for robotics. All of these things have a value proposition, but every business has to evaluate what that value proposition looks like for them in terms of the time, the workflows, how it's going to transform their operations, and then make those adjustments. But I think that across the board, what we're seeing in multiple industries is that there is a value proposition there. And in order to grow, in order to stay competitive on a global scale, businesses absolutely must automate where they can, or they will become obsolete.
Yeah, very definitive. Jen, where online can our viewers find out more about the Pittsburgh Robotics Network and take a look at that survey?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you'd like to, well, I have to say, on November 5th, 2025, we have our annual event. And it's here. It's the Pittsburgh Robotics and AI Discovery Day. It's free. We are expecting nearly 10,000 attendees, and we will have over 200 organizations exhibiting. And these are going to be live demos of advanced manufacturing technologies, robotics technologies, multi-industry. We're going to see a tech and AI zone with all sorts of other applications of advanced and emerging technologies and AI, and a career pathways area where you can actually explore where you can get that upskilling, reskilling, and find your place in this economic revolution that's occurring. So, and that's on our website. You can find more information about that signature annual event, our organization, and ways to engage with all of these companies in a whole variety of ways at www.robopgh.org.
Awesome. Jennifer Apicella, Executive Director of the Pittsburgh Robotics Network. Thanks for joining me on the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. It was a pleasure to have a conversation about this.
That's it for today's Industry Insights and Trends podcast, brought to you by engineering.com. If you like this program and want to keep pace with the latest innovations in engineering, subscribe to our newsletters such as Design Weekly, 3D printing, aerospace and defense, digital transformation, simulation, or a weekly roundup at engineering.com/subscribe. For our deeper engineering series, visit engineering.com TV for exclusive shows like Designing the Future, Manufacturing the Future, and the Engineering Roundtable, found exclusively on engineering.com TV. Thanks for tuning in.